Once upon a time, in a kingdom far away, there lived a young princess whose beauty was said to rival the snow on the highest mountain tops. Her name was Snow White, for her skin was as pale as fresh fallen snow, her lips as red as the ripest rose, and her hair as black as ebony. She was the pride of the kingdom, cherished by all who knew her gentle heart and joyful spirit. But her stepmother, the queen, saw only a rival. The queen herself was proud, vain, and obsessed with her own beauty, and she could not bear the thought that anyone could surpass her. Every day, the queen would stand before her magic mirror and ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And every day, the mirror would reply, "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all." But as the years passed and Snow White grew into a radiant young woman, the answer changed. One morning, the queen asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror replied, "You are fair, my queen, it's true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you." The queen's heart filled with jealousy and rage. She could not tolerate the idea of being second in beauty to her stepdaughter. Consumed by envy, she devised a dark plan. She summoned the royal huntsman and commanded him to take Snow White deep into the forest and never return with her. The huntsman, loyal but kind, could not fathom harming the innocent princess. Deep in the shadowy woods, as Snow White knelt in fear, pleading for her life, the huntsman's resolve melted. He confessed the queen's cruel intentions and urged Snow White to run far away and never return to the castle. Snow White fled through the trees, heart pounding, branches tearing at her dress, until she collapsed in exhaustion. As dawn broke, she found herself in a clearing where a small, charming cottage stood. Curious and desperate for shelter, she gently knocked on the door, but no one answered. She pushed the door open and entered the house. Inside, she found everything in miniature. A tiny table set with 7 plates, 7 cups, and 7 little chairs. Upstairs, she discovered 7 small beds, all neatly made. Exhausted from her ordeal, Snow White lay down across the beds and fell into a deep sleep. As day faded into evening, the rightful owners of the cottage returned. They were 7 dwarfs who labored each day in the nearby mountains, mining for precious gems. Entering their home, they noticed something strange. Someone had eaten their food, sipped their drinks, and disturbed their belongings. Climbing the stairs, they found Snow White asleep. At first, they were afraid, but when she awoke and told them her story, their hearts softened with sympathy. The dwarfs welcomed Snow White with open arms, offering her a safe haven in their cottage. In return, she promised to cook, clean, and care for them. Each morning, the dwarfs warned her, "Beware of strangers. The queen may yet find you." Snow White agreed, vowing to remain cautious. Meanwhile, back at the castle, the queen once again consulted her mirror. When she heard that Snow White still lived and remained the fairest in the land, her fury knew no bounds. Determined to destroy her rival, the queen disguised herself as an old peddler woman and set off for the dwarf's cottage. The queen's first attempt was to offer Snow White a colorful, tightly laced bodice. With false kindness, she convinced Snow White to try it on and laced it so tightly that Snow White could not breathe and fainted to the floor. Thankfully, the dwarfs returned in time to rescue her, loosening the bodice and reviving her. Unwilling to give up, the queen tried again, this time with a poisoned comb. Disguised once more, she visited the cottage and persuaded Snow White to try the beautiful comb in her hair. The instant the comb touched Snow White's scalp, she collapsed. Once again, the wise dwarfs arrived home just in time, removed the comb, and saved her life. Furious and desperate, the queen prepared her final, most sinister plan. She created a poisoned apple, so red and glossy that no one could resist it. One half of the apple contained the deadly poison, while the other half was harmless. Disguised as a frail, kindly old woman, the queen visited Snow White once more. She offered the apple, insisting it was a gift for a kind heart. When Snow White hesitated, the queen took a bite from the safe half to prove it was harmless. Trusting the old woman, Snow White bit into the poisoned half and instantly fell to the ground, lifeless. The queen, believing she had finally triumphed, hurried back to her castle and demanded the mirror's verdict. Now, at last, the mirror answered, "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all." But the dwarfs, upon finding Snow White, were heartbroken. They could not bring themselves to bury her, for she looked as if she were only sleeping. Instead, they placed her in a glass coffin in the forest, where they could keep watch over her and mourn her loss. Seasons passed, and Snow White's beauty remained undiminished. One day, a prince traveling through the forest came upon the glass coffin. Struck by her beauty, he asked the dwarfs if he could take her to his palace, for he could not bear to leave her behind. The dwarfs, moved by his sincerity, consented. As the prince's servants carried the coffin through the woods, they stumbled on a root, and the jolt dislodged the piece of poisoned apple from Snow White's throat. She gasped, colors returned to her cheeks, and she opened her eyes. The prince rejoiced, and Snow White, grateful for her second chance at life, agreed to marry him. The kingdom celebrated their union with great joy. The wicked queen, upon hearing of Snow White's survival and happiness, was consumed at last by her own envy and vanished from the land. And so, Snow White and her prince lived in peace and happiness, while the seven dwarfs continued their work in the mountains, forever cherished by the princess whose life they had saved. Their story became a legend, passed down through generations, reminding all that kindness, courage, and the hope of new beginnings can triumph over even the darkest of jealousies.